Thank you for listening to the Living Zen-podcast. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can take the next step in developing your own Zen practice, or how you can more formally connect with our community, please explore our online Orientation to Zen practice, which you can find on our website at zenwest.ca. If you enjoy the resources that we make available online, we would very much appreciate your support. There are a number of ways that you can help us continue to do the work we do. One of the best ways is by becoming a part of our community as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen-podcast, eZendo, and our online Orientation to Zen will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and at Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also made available for free on our website for all of our members and associates. You may also want to download the Living Zen Podcast app, which makes downloading and listening to the podcast effortless. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening to Living Zen. Oh, here I think it's better to come late. I think it's good to just learn the sort of procedure of coming late. That's all. So if you come late, there's only a couple times where you shouldn't come in, and that is if the kaihan, which is the board that's outside, is being sounded. You know, the knock, 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 that thing. It's called the kaihan. If that's sounding, you're supposed to actually just stay perfectly still, don't move. And the Jikijitsu is offering incense at the Butsudan, so you don't come in during that. Once that stuff's over, if you're late, you can come in, and the form is that you actually go to the shoji, in front of the shoji, and you just bow with your hands palm to palm to the shoji, and the shoji will bow back. And that's just like, it's kind of like checking in, you know, like the shoji is the person who's responsible for the well-being of everybody that's in the room. So when you come in, you just say, okay, another student reporting for Zendo, bow, and then you take the next sort of open seat. So usually if you come here late on a Tuesday night, a shoji's going to jump up and sort of tell you where to sit. So, but I would much rather have people show up late than go, oh, I'm 5 minutes late, I better not come. That's a great excuse, isn't it?
I trust you. I was just wondering the idea behind it.
Another question? Do you have another question?
Oh, yeah. It's not after a couple weeks of listening to myself and other people do presentations,
Mm-hmm.
when you do your talks, does your voice and inflection change from how you talk in normal life?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And why? How do you make that decision?
I don't know that I make a decision so much about it. For me, I think a big part of it is, like before I got into Zen, I did a lot of theater training. So I think a big part of it is just a part of it is just training. You know, it's like I've been trained to speak in public, and then another part of it is just like where I'm coming from is quite different than sort of my daily functioning. So, for me, you know, it's kind of a perfect setup for speaking. If you could have, you know, if you could do presentations in school in the same way, where, you know, go in. Everyone in the room sits quietly for 15 minutes, and then sort of you have this opportunity where they're not, you know, really, nobody's really looking at you, and you can just sort of speak from the deepest place that you can get to in your own heart, in your guts, and that's where you talk from, I think that you'd have much easier time speaking, giving presentations in school. So, what? You're in big trouble now, mister. Yeah, so it's, why? I don't think there's a decision. It's just that's kind of what comes out. Sometimes I feel like it's like channeling or something. Oh, maybe I should do a really funny voice sometime, you know. Whoa. Yeah.
Tonight, it was an interesting format for me for the first time. Next week and the week after, will it be very, very similar to what we did tonight? Yeah,
the form is pretty consistent. We use form in Zen as a kind of a container. So that's why there's so much structure, is so that as you become more familiar with the form, it allows you to really kind of soften and let go into it, because it creates this very sort of solid structure that you can kind of unwind within. You know where the boundaries are, you know kind of the form that's coming, and it gives you an opportunity to really see where you are mentally, emotionally, physically, when you're not expending all this energy trying to sort of stay on top of what's going on all the time. At the beginning, it's like, well, there's, a million things that you're trying to take in. But very quickly, if you come regularly or practice in a formal way regularly, it really does kind of disappear into the background, where you just have this solid structure for practice. And the form is there so that we don't have to do much talking in order to transition from sitting to walking to chanting. It's like there isn't a whole bunch of explanation. It just flows quite smoothly. So.
Is this tea circle also part of every week?
Yeah.
So then one can reinvent myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's many people's greatest challenge, is sort of, what am I going to say this week? What am I going to say this week?
No cookies.
Well, Ken's not here tonight.
We have a guy who brings cookies, but he's not here.
Yeah, we're trying to fast you a little bit with the season coming up. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
I'm still fairly new to this, but I participated in Sundays, and I've noted periodically, though, even though the form is consistent, there are changes that are introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to do it like this. You have to hold your hands when you're chanting in this way instead of that way, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Now, what is the rationale behind doing that?
Well, usually, if there's transitions in forms like that, what's happening is that it's a Zen center that's developing, that's growing, and so there is a complete form, right? And so as we go forward, like when I first started practicing in Victoria, I was kind of the only person who knew any form. So often, I was there ringing bells, and then sort of like start the meditation period, and then go into the kitchen and cook the meal for the retreat, and then come back and make sure that I could hit the bell again. And so as we've gone forward, we started with a very stripped down, simplified version of the form. And as people become more sort of competent and familiar with the form, you can add more of the full form in. So that's basically what's happening, is that as we now have 2 more monks and a whole bunch of people who have done Jukai and have done a bunch of training, so you can actually sort of give them more of the full form, so that we can really see and experience the depth of that form. So that's all that's happening. Sometimes there's transition, but there's also, Zen's quite practical too. So if we're doing something that I go, oh, this is the monastic form, but it totally doesn't work as far as providing a stable and smoothly flowing structure, I may also go, that doesn't work, so we're pulling that out. And that's one of the glorious benefits of being an abbot, is you can do stuff like that. So.
I just got confused because I thought it was to kind of snap you out of getting too comfortable with it. Do you know what I mean? So then I thought it wasn't about this mold that you were supposed to sort of melt into and memorize and then just not think about, because all of a sudden there's a new thing to
Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's that you've been doing it the way that you think is the way that it's supposed to be done, and nobody's been really paying attention because they've got 10 things to look at, and then somebody notices, oh, she's not doing that the way she's supposed to be doing it, and so they say, hey, you're supposed to do it this way, and you go, oh, this is a change, and they go, no, that's the original. So it's, my teacher was, and the way that I was trained, because it was immersive, because you were there sort of all the time, there were no manuals or anything like that. It was a very sort of apprenticeship model. And there, especially when you're a monk, there's a lot more of that, what you're talking about. And like, for example, you would do in the morning, there would be a meeting with the monks and the teacher, and we were doing a ceremony. And so we'd go over the ceremony and we'd walk through the ceremony, like do a rehearsal of the ceremony so that everybody sort of was on board with it. And then in the afternoon, you'd start into the ceremony and you'd be standing there and, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing that you covered this morning. And the teacher would turn around and say, no, don't do it there in the middle of the ceremony. And this is sort of like, can you drop the sort of supposed to and go with what's arising now? And this was, that my personal feeling is that I don't know that you have to do that much in a center at this stage in its development, because that stuff happens anyway. Like tonight, Doyu was giving instruction over there, and then he had to come in, do the jikijutsu over here, and then, people didn't, if people don't show up, you've got to transition there. So there's plenty of opportunity to sort of let go of how things are supposed to be going and how they're actually going. Yeah.
I'm almost hearing it like being forgiving of yourself. Not so hard. Doesn't have to be perfect.
Well, I think actually in a lot of ways the practice itself is ruthless that way, because well, I think it's you have to come to the place where mistakes are okay, because the minutia that is involved in the full monastic form is such that there is no way that in any of the roles that you can get through the whole evening doing that role perfectly. Like, the chances of that are virtually zero. And even if it happens, that just sets you up for the next time. So you come to this, my son and I, Keegan here, have had a lot of conversations in the car, because when he first came, it would deeply upset him, I think. He would make a little slip up and he'd be like, I was so close. And I'd say the point isn't to get it right. The point is to make mistakes and to learn from the mistakes and to just sort of relax into manifesting as clearly as you can. So each moment, yeah. And sometimes you hit it right on, and sometimes you miss it entirely, and you just got to keep going. So, yeah.
I was quite amazed that I could sit still for 3 sessions of 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Peer pressure, maybe, I don't know. But I just realized that looking down at the rug, because it was such a nondescript rug, it was very easy to lose myself in the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've heard that there's such a thing called mantras.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, from my little understanding, mantras are supposed to help you kind of focus as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sometimes have individual mantras?
Zen, we don't really use mantra practice. The primary focus in Zen is on the breath, particularly in the beginning. And then in Rinzai Zen practice in particular, as you continue practice, we do koan practice, which in some ways are very much like mantras in that it is a particular way of engaging with a specific problem. It's just a way of focusing. So mantras, or even prayers, like short prayers, or sometimes vows, like there's the 3 refuges that we do in all schools of Buddhism. But basically, they all come back to the same thing, which is not different than just paying attention to the breath, which is just this sort of kind of immersive, singular focus on a particular thing. In Zen, we focus on the breath because it's a non-conceptual, non-verbal, experiential thing that's always with you. Like, you don't have to sort of like, what's my mantra? There's none of that. It's like, you're always breathing. It's always with you. You can forget your beads at home, but you'll never forget your breath at home. So that's why we really focus on the breath. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question. On the weekend, I witnessed a very minor car accident, and something that struck me was I noticed that at least two of the people involved, their immediate response was anger, and other people responding with fear. And I've noticed a lot of fear and anger in the world, and I don't want people to feel that, but it's like I don't know what can I do to make that better.
No, I think, well, my general approach to transforming the world is sort of, it's based in this teaching of interdependent origination. So it's very difficult. One Zen teacher, one of my favorite sayings, I use it all the time, is, I can't so much as fart for you. How can I possibly sort of make you more compassionate, or something like this? So I think that we have to accept the responsibility for our own minds and our own conduct, and that's how we can transform others or inspire others to transform themselves, I think. Fear and anger, they're quite natural animal reactions to being in danger. And we have to investigate how we respond in our own lives when difficult things come up, and practice and experiment and explore how we can go about transforming our own responses. And the biggest part of that, the first part of that, is just based on this simple practice that we do, which is just awareness. You can come in on a Tuesday night and sit down, and within the first 5 minutes, you're suddenly aware of the amount of stuff that's going on inside of you that, like 5 minutes before, there was a curtain, hiding it. Like you had no idea that this was bugging me or that was bugging me. So by just becoming more aware on a moment-to-moment, day-by-day basis of what's going on inside of yourself, that starts to transform how you respond, and how you respond transforms how other people respond as well. If you're in a car accident and somebody is angry, and I've seen this, I've done this, if you've been in a car accident and the other person comes at you angry, and you actually don't respond angrily, but you say, oh, are you okay? Geez, I'm really sorry that this happened. You can actually watch their response transform. Sometimes it throws them right off because, they thought there was going to be a fight, and that's really the only reason that they came on angry in the first place. So you see that a huge amount of transforming how other people respond is just starting with yourself. So start with yourself. Yeah.
It'll rub off.
Huh?
It'll rub off.
It rubs off, absolutely. Emanates outwards. The old metaphor of like throwing a rock into the still pond, and the ripples just go out. So just be the pond, even. Yeah. Fun questions?
Questions that they got long.
Well,
Well,
I
Sydney
have
had
a
one
question
here.
that might annoy other people that I'm planning to ask you afterward, but I found your talk very personally relevant to my situation today,
Mm-hmm.
which is to say I fell asleep before you got to any of the recommendations. What were you actually recommending to deal with stress?
I recorded the talk. It'll be available online on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the connection with improv, and if you feel like saying anything about improv
if I want to say anything about improv and practice, yeah, they're the same thing in a lot of ways. Anything in particular, any angle in particular? I mean, I look at...
There's a great talk that was from the TED Victoria series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that one, yeah. I think a big part of why I got into Zen and why it worked so well for me was because I did spend so much time doing improv. Like, I never really thought about it, but in high school, like, I did improv theater every day. I was in the theater sports club, and we practiced every day, and we had performances every Friday, and then I was doing all kinds of theater stuff on top of it. So for me, when I started getting into Zen, everything just made sense because all of these roles that we do and the form that we use and putting on the clothes, it's all, like, I've started occasionally referring to Zen as theater of transformation, right? Because the whole thing starts with this investigation of the nature of self. And so when we come in the door, we can go about doing our Zen practice in a couple of ways. We can come in as Joe or Bob or Sally or whatever, and Sally's going to do this job that we have. Or we can come in and we can completely drop Bob or Sally at the door, and this role has a name, shoji, jikijitsu, densu, whatever. And the tradition in Zen is that when a monk takes a role, then you don't call them by their name anymore, you call them by the role, right? So, Laura comes in and she's the shoji, and so people start calling her shoji. And her practice is to completely drop Laura and to manifest the character of shoji. It's kind of like commedia dell'arte or any kind of no kabuki stuff where there are sort of like, what are they called? It's like masks, like character masks, and they have certain characteristics. The jikijitsu is the hard ass. They're the person who's all about rules. They keep time. They make the corrections. And they're traditionally called the Zendo father. And the shoji is responsible for making sure that the temperature is moderate and the airflow is good. And if anybody has any, physical ailments, they're the person that, takes care of that. And they're referred to traditionally as the Zendo mother. But that's a characteristic that can be played by anybody. And in fact, practice training is best when you get a person, say Dave, who's really a hard ass, and you put them in the shoji role, and their job is to let go of Dave completely and manifest shoji. And you can tell a really solid Zen practitioner when you can sort of move them around, and the transformation is quite profound, And you get caught as a student sometimes. Like, for example, I've had experiences where I've gone to sesshin and I'm sitting, and then something's happened and I needed to talk to the shoji, and oh man, they were just like butter, just like, oh yeah, well, here you go, let me help you. And then the next session you go back and that same person is the jikijitsu, and you go to them like they're your buddy, right? You go, last time they were so nice to me, and you go, hey man, and they just go, no talking, and you're like, oh God, right? But it's because they're taking on the role. So there's that aspect of it. But then the improv part comes because of the structure, because of the form that we have. There is this large amount that's going on. And one of the things that a lot of people say is, it's too structured and it's too, like rigid and all this kind of stuff. But anybody who's done this kind of practice for a while, that that's an illusion. And actually, madness is happening all the time because everybody is trying to sort of maintain this quite solid structure, But within that structure are a whole bunch of human beings and uncontrollable elements that are, candles are tipping over and teacups are being spilled and people are forgetting stuff. And so it's always like, how do you respond as the role that you're in to the dynamic thing that's happening? And in that way, there's a lot of sort of improv theater that's going on. And the biggest part, just like in improv theater, is just this not saying no. That's the key, and one of the keys in improv theater, and it's one of the keys in Zen practice as well. Is something happens, and it's a key in life. Something happens in life, and our first response, if it is contrary to our expectation or what we think should happen, our response is to refuse it and say, no, that's not how it's supposed to go, and we get angry and we get frightened or whatever. And if we transform that, and when something happens, we say, well, that's interesting, where do we go from here? The scene has changed and we sort of have to go with it. So it's all good training. I could go on and on and on about this. Koan practice is once a foundation is established in sort of basic Zen practice using the form that we use, and we start getting involved in koan practice, that's where things get a little bit more intentionally dynamic. That's where we start, it's like in theater sports when we start having sort of, there's a few games where an individual will shout something spontaneously at the performers and the scene has to change based on this new piece that's been thrown, and it's kind of like that. So
There's a kids' theater that does that.
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, these are all improv games. So, and life is improv. That's the key, It's not about getting a better script. It's about tossing the script away and having fundamental confidence that you have as your capacity everything that it takes to do what's required. So.
And that's just what she was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The anger and fear.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Any other questions this evening?
I think Tony's going to fall asleep.
I listened to the recommendation.
He's letting go into it.
I tried very hard to listen, but the wind kept my cat up all last night, so I didn't get very much sleep.
Well, thank you everyone for coming this evening. I just want to let you know that our offer here.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.